Hello, glad to see you on my channel. I really value it. And today I want to share with you a wonderful story. It's a dramatic story that will come as a total shock to everybody. It is a really amazing story. So enjoy watching it.
The director came up with a cunning business, and when one of the girls overheard him talking to a customer, "I'll marry a millionaire and you'll all bite your elbows in envy." With a wave of her hands, Lucy jumped up and started bouncing on the bed as if it were a trampoline, laughing gaily. "How lucky I am! How lucky I am!" Angelica, sitting opposite on the windowsill, sighed. No, she was, of course, very happy for her friend. After all, the life of the future graduate of the orphanage is not sugar to go out all alone in the big world, where you will need to take care of themselves. And here, in fact, such a gift of fate, and for nothing. And yet something did not give Angelica peace. In this orphanage, she spent her whole life since the crimson blanket. The baby was thrown under the gate one snowy December night. And in this orphanage for a couple of years, something extraordinary was going on. The older girls were ready to kiss Director Naomi's hands, who cared for them as if they were her own daughters. She had a kind word for each of them. She was patient and delicate, never shouted, never invented punishments. But the main reason for the adoration of the ruler of this small world was that she helped some girls to settle down well after graduation. Just one day, one of the students, Selena, reported the news. It turns out that the director has relatives abroad who own an international agency that helps young people from disadvantaged families with employment. Imagine, it turns out that a simple waitress can earn at least $1,000 a week, Selena shared with her friends. True, not with all of them. Only with Angelica, Lucy, Ekaterina, and Veronica. It was the director asked not to talk all over the orphanage so that the other guys would not be offended. She herself gave the names of the girls with whom she could share all the plans and even asked Selena to tell them to think about it. Maybe they also want to live normally after graduation. It turned out that the opportunity to get a great job was not rubber, and Valentina, as she said herself, had to make a hard choice and help only some of them. And she made it in favor of, as she said herself, the most talented, promising children. It was them that she recommended to her foreign acquaintances, and they found vacancies. Moreover, the agency undertook all expenses on visa registration, air tickets purchase, as well as provided newcomers with housing, gave an advance payment before the salary. That's how it turned out that as soon as some lucky girl turned 18, she could fly to a bright, as Naomi said, future. And what, just like that from the street, Angelica hummed, even without knowledge of English. She was only 16 at the time of the conversation, the youngest of her friends. "Oh, you always look for minuses in everything." Selena waved her away. "What is there difficult dishes from the menu to memorize? You can learn the language on the spot." "What? Have not heard? There are all sorts of courses where you can learn from scratch in a week." Soon Selena left. She promised to call to write, but it's been almost 2 years. She hasn't sent a single message. Her friends were sad. She'd gotten conceited in her foreign life. After her, several other girls left. But Angelica didn't believe that Selena had forgotten them. That wouldn't be like her at all. Selena had been placed in an orphanage at the age of 12 after losing her parents in a car accident. The only relative who wanted to take care of her was her grandmother, but the guardianship was not granted. The old woman had a stroke. And then another relative had gotten involved, and she, infirm, was placed in a nursing home. And ever since the principal promised to arrange her fate, Selena, as enchanted all day long, has been saying that as soon as she earns more money, she will come back, take her grandmother, pay for her treatment in an expensive private clinic, and they will live happily together. Angelica warmly supported such plans of her friend. She even knew Kathy's grandmother a little bit, and several times she and Selena went to visit her. Angelica once went to Naomi to ask if she could get in touch with Selena, but for some reason the director got nervous and said that it was confidential information, that if the girl wanted to, she would call, right? And then Naomi began to scold Angelica, recalling to her some little things, and ended up kicking her out of the office, telling her to stop filling her head with nonsense. And now it was Lucy's turn. The principal promised her a job in a nightclub as a cook who would prepare desserts for VIP clients. They promised to train her for this profession on the spot. Lucy said when she stopped laughing and jumping just because she was exhausted, she flew up to her friend and ruffled her hair. Well, think about it. You're the smartest one in the class. You're an honor student. So what? Do you want to go out and work as a saleswoman? And there, you'd hook up with someone too. I don't like it, Angelica said. You know how many stories about how girls are taken abroad and they're forced to do. She looked carefully at her friend. About this agency, nothing on the internet even right. I searched. Not a word. You're like an old woman, suspecting everyone. Lucy grinned. She, like Angelica, had recently turned 18. Unlike her friend, Lucy was an orphan with a living mother and father who had been deprived of her parental rights for drinking and leaving her daughter unattended in a decrepit village house. Lucy hated them and always said she would never forgive them for anything. She also said that being selfish was good and useful in life, and she was very proud of how beautiful she was. Lucy stood out among her friends as a tropical bird, tall, with white porcelain skin studded with golden freckles. By the age of 18, she had a slender, like a reed, but feminine figure. But the main adornment of Lucy was hair fiery red by nature. They curled mane down to the waist. Angelica never envied her beauty, although she could not call herself a beauty. So ordinary, average height, figure is okay, brown hair, and only eyes of a thick green tone. The girl and herself, they liked them for real. Now Angelica was just tired, sitting in the same room with Lucy and having a useless, in fact, conversation. Even her head ached. She was sad that their small friendly company had broken up. After Selena's departure, the connection with Catherine and Veronica was cut off. True, they eventually refused the principal's offer and simply graduated from the orphanage. It seems that Veronica quickly got married, and Ekaterina entered the doctor. I'm going out, Angelica said. She climbed down from the windowsill, picked up her jacket from the back of the chair. It was golden autumn outside. I'll get some fresh air, and went out into the corridor. When it was nasty, Angelica always went deep into the yard, where she had a secret place, an old gazebo covered with ivy. For some reason, the other orphans hardly ever came here, maybe because this place was considered cursed. That was silly, of course, but the inhabitants of the orphanage said that who will sit in it, he will never find a loving, real family. Angelica did not believe in curses and sometimes hid from everyone here with pleasure. But in this twilight hour, when the dining room was about to set the tables for dinner, someone occupied the gazebo. Angelica heard a quiet voice, and then, coming closer, was very surprised to recognize its owner. Naomi was sitting in the gazebo and talking to someone on the phone. The girl wanted to leave quietly, but froze when she heard a strange phrase. Yes, the new girl will soon be ready, but the price should still talk about. Holding her breath and looking under her feet not to inadvertently step on a twig, not to rustle a fallen leaf, the girl crept up and lurked behind a tree. No, you listen to me. Lucy has model parameters, excellent health. I understand. But you also understand I'm taking this risk. You think I don't know how much you make off each one of them? That's how it is. The principal was silent for a few minutes, humming into the phone. You ran a brothel in Belfast, but you promised no one would find out. Oh, so that's why. No, I'm sorry, but I don't mold girls out of dough to supply you with new girls so quickly. Here, take Lucy. She's worth 3. The principal said a few more phrases describing to a gentleman with a long exotic name. What a clever girl Lucy is. Just priceless. What? Are you threatening me? Okay, I get it. I'll try to find someone else, but I want a rush fee and risk. Okay, yeah, I'll let you know as soon as I do. Angelica froze, nestled against the tree, pressing her cheek against the bark so that it hurt. It seemed that her heart was beating so deafeningly. It seemed that the air disappeared somewhere. The young girl simply could not believe what she had heard. And at the same time, everything was desperate, nightmarishly clear. A man, put in his place in the orphanage to be the support and protection of the children, did terrible things. The principal came out of the gazebo and Angelica squeezed her eyes shut for fear she would notice. She would definitely notice. But Naomi, apparently too immersed in her own thoughts, just passed by. Angelica was shocked. So this was the job the girls were going for. That's why none of the ones who left, Selene. Nausea choked in her throat, and Angelica slapped herself on the cheek to bring herself to her senses. Selena. Sweet, gentle, timid Selena. What had become of her? What had become of her? Her thoughts were racing feverishly, hysterically. What if she was rescued? She said that some place had been raided, but logic told Angelica that the chances of that, oh, how small. Who knows where Selena was taken? And Lucy? She's supposed to leave very soon as she gets her passport. Angelica was only 18, but she was not naive and well aware that the people behind the principal of the orphanage are very powerful. How far did they spread their net? Who are they? And how to stop all this? And most importantly, how to save those who can still be saved. In normal life, Angelica did not rush to make decisions, had to weigh everything carefully. But the thought that pierced the mind now seemed the only right, and also absolutely crazy. But the girl had already made up her mind. Immediately after dinner, Angelica came to the door of the principal's office and knocked. "Come in." Naomi was sitting at a massive, expensive desk and going through some papers. Angelica smiled at her. Only to the girl, this smile seemed like the grin of a predatory beast. "Naomi Fedorovna, I need to talk to you." The girl began embarrassed and timidly. "I've been thinking. It's time for me to leave the orphanage." "Where will I go?" "Well, I'll get an apartment, but it needs so much. And then it would be a good way to study, and I can't afford the budget." The principal nodded. "Sit down, my dear." "Yes, you're right. Your life is not easy." "That's what I thought." Angelica swallowed. She suddenly became afraid that the aunt across from her would smell a lie. As wolves smell a man wounded, grab him. Maybe, if only it is possible, maybe I can work abroad too. I look at Lucy and I envy her. I'm capable and neat, you know that. Angelica made begging eyes and moved forward across the table. "I know English well." "Well, Naomi Fyodorovna, my dear, help me please." "That's how." The principal shook her head. Before the girl came, she was shaking with fear. Because of the fact that the truth might still be revealed. Because of the fact that those who stood above demanded from her goods fresh. As if, excuse me, it's like picking apples from a tree. But now, apparently, luck was again on her side. The principal had had her eye on Angelica for a long time. A pretty face with young features, chubby cheeks, and a neat nose, big eyes. Oh, they love them there, they say. Naomi went from one side and from the other, but Angelica did not agree. And now look at her, and look how she sang when there was nothing left to do before she left the orphanage. Naomi licked her lips, which were not neatly painted with brick-colored lipstick. 2 girls would be enough to satisfy them. She should probably lay low for a while. "Okay, honey. Don't worry," Naomi turned to Angelica. "We'll make it work. You and Lucy will fly together soon." Angelique spent the next few weeks as if in a dream. It was not difficult to collect a lot of things from the orphanage graduate. The thing was that the girl, having stepped on this path, suddenly became confused. How to organize everything correctly in detail. Angelica spent all her free time on the internet looking for information about what was waiting for her, or rather for her and Lucy. The director said that they would fly to London, and there supposedly they would be met and escorted to the place where they would work and live. But Angelica knew for sure that in fact she would have a minimum of time to do everything she planned, and it would be necessary to act as soon as they arrived. The girl had already considered several options for how to escape. Sharp, bold, and not wandering scared hair, and straight to the local police station. It was not difficult to find the necessary addresses and phone numbers on the internet. Of course, it was impossible to exclude one terrible risk, that there, in Scotland Yard, there are corrupt officials, those who cover gangsters. But Angelica decided she from the threshold of such a noise will raise such a ruckus, will attract public attention. And besides, immediately go to the right police officer. She wrote out the name of a man who, according to reports of the English press, has done a lot to combat human trafficking. He will definitely help. He would have to believe her. Angelica also studied very carefully the plan of the airport and the surrounding streets. In short, the girl hoped that her plan had enough thoughtful details to make it a success. And it can't be otherwise. Angelica was not a fantasist, but here she just couldn't stop the flight of imagination as the English authorities, having received such important information from her, immediately organized a rescue mission, capture the main villain, free the unfortunate captives, and of course, help to find Selena. And then when it's all over, they all return home, that is to this city, which Angelica happened to consider her hometown. And of course, Naomi will not go unpunished either. She will be destroyed. On the day of departure, Angelica took off her passport cover, lavender colored, with kittens. The document the girl hid in the lining of her handbag, and in the cover, she simply put blank sheets of paper. She knew from what she had read on the internet, that their passports would be taken away from them immediately, right at the airport. But she'd hoped that in the hustle and bustle, they would just take them away and not look. And then when they realized they had cheated, it would be too late for the villains. "Oh, I'm so worried," smiled Lucy, spinning in front of the mirror. The girl wore her best and favorite red mini dress, as well as golden-heeled sandals. True, it was chilly outside, but Lucy said that for the sake of beauty, one could be a little cold. "Everything will be all right," Angelica said. She was all packed, but she was dressed practically and, most importantly, comfortably for escape, in loose pants and a knitted sweater with a hood. The sweater was gray, but it was double-sided, and if you turned it out, it was green. Angelica was going to do that for disguise as soon as she left the airport. They'll be looking for a brown hair and a gray sweatshirt. Ha! She will be a girl in a green sweater and also a long-haired blonde with glasses. Wig and glasses with simple glasses were already hidden at the bottom of the same handbag. "Believe me, your life will change once and for all," the principal told Angelica as the girls were being picked up by a cab at the gates of the orphanage. Angelica met her gaze. How could anyone be so heartless? After all, Naomi, she herself had a daughter, a teenage girl. In the cab and the airport lounge, Angelica tried not to pay attention to Lucy's chattering about how everything was going to work out great for her. "Hey, did you fall asleep?" Angelica shook her friend's shoulder and the girl woke up. She really had dozed off. It was time to board. They had to get to London with a connection in Berlin. To Germany, the girls had to travel independently, and further, as promised, they were to be met by a man curator who was to take care of them. Sitting in the chair by the window, Angelica thought that perhaps she should have watched more thrillers and detectives in her life. Maybe she would have learned something useful from them. And she also remembered a statement she had once heard that real life was more exciting than any fiction in books and movies. She laughed nervously, and it was impossible not to agree. What she had gotten herself into, it was madness. But Angelica held on, just knew, felt instinctively if she relaxed, let herself worry then, just snapped. Will panic, and this cannot be allowed in any case. After all, she is now responsible not only for herself, but must save others. "Well, where is he?" asked Lucy unhappily when they, having received the luggage, found themselves in a huge, noisy hall. "I thought they would meet us with this poster." "Oh, they will find it." She waved her hand and pulled her friend by the hand. "Let's go to the cafeteria. There are buns." Angelica nodded. The mysterious curator must have been late, and it was necessary to eat and drink the biggest glass of coffee. The flight fell on the night hours, and she, having napped intermittently, felt broken. Lucy and Angelica, right? The girls were sitting at a table when they were distracted from their chocolate snail rolls and coffee by a strong male voice. Angelica looked up. The stranger was prohibitively tall, blonde with correct, but somehow sharp facial features. Black leather jacket. For some reason, this detail of clothing seemed to Angelica the most memorable. It as if concentrated, emphasized all the hidden aggressiveness radiating from the man. "Yes," Lucy answered first. "Are you supposed to meet us?" "Oh, hello." And we were completely frightened. We were lost. She jumped up so that she almost overturned the table. She threw a telling look at her friend. "Look, what a handsome man meets us and also speaks." Angelica was not strong in accents, but for some reason it seemed to her that this man was not European, but maybe from Canada or the USA. "So, you're taking us further," said the girl and took her time buttering the bun. "Good afternoon. There are still 2 hours to our flight." "Change of plans," smirked the stranger. "We're going to Jamaica." Angelica choked on a piece of muffin, coughed, threw another look, now shocked and frightened. "What nonsense? Jamaica when it's supposed to be London." The girl hurriedly sipped her coffee. "Calm down. We can't have him suspecting anything." Lucy was surprised too, but in her own way. At first she asked, "Where is it?" When she heard that the destination was in the Caribbean islands, she shrieked, clapped her hands, and said that she had to go to the store to buy a swimsuit. The man introduced himself as Ethan and said they already had their tickets booked, and it was time to go so as not to miss boarding. "I'll finish it," Angelica said with a deep sense of dignity, and began to spread butter and jam on top of the bun even more slowly than before. "And I'll go. There's still time." The blonde man gave her a sizzling look. He clenched his teeth so that his jaws were sharper, but Angelica did not think to cancel her plans. In general, the news took away her appetite. She just desperately wanted to buy a little time to think, or maybe she should run right here. She has absolutely no idea who to address there, on this island of Jamaica, and where to run to too. The plan, thought out with such desperate courage, crumbled like a row of dominoes touched by a snap of the fingers. By the time the scone was eaten and the coffee drunk, Angelica had come to the conclusion that the only solution was to move on. She decided that finding out where the police office in Jamaica was could be done from the phone while they were flying. Lucy, while they were waiting for landing, kept chirping. Ethan answered sparingly, but willy-nilly Angelica managed to find out that he was just over 30 years old, that he was single and had been working in this very praised organization for almost 6 months. And Angelica did not believe a single word, except perhaps for his age. This man was no better than their principal, a lying, cynical monster, supplying innocent souls for the amusement of perverts. And unfortunately, they sat across the aisle on the airplane. Lucy sat next to some obese lady who, despite the fall season, entered the plane in a pineapple dress and a funny straw hat, apparently ready for the tropics. And Angelica's neighbor turned out to be Ethan. The girl mentally cursed. How inconvenient. Now she would have to try to hold the phone so that he would not notice what she was looking at. Finally, the long flight was over. The airport met with the familiar noise. The girls received their luggage, and finally, what Angelica had expected happened. The monster accompanying them said that he needed the girls' passports. Allegedly, there was a sudden need to settle one formality. Angelica took a deep breath and tried to squeeze out a carefree smile. "Of course, here." She held out her document. "I'll leave for a moment. I need to go to the ladies' room." Ethan nodded and told Lucy to wait for him at the kiosk, where they sold all sorts of souvenirs, went somewhere, lost in the crowd. Angelica exhaled huskily and practically ran to the bathroom. 3 minutes, no more than 5. Turn her sweater up. It was chosen for London, and for the local weather was too warm, but it would be strange to go to the toilet with hand luggage. Nervously confusing everything, the girl pulled the wig out of the bag and the door to the stall swung open, just flew off the hook. With a shriek, Angelica stared at Ethan. He was very angry. "Do you want to explain anything?" He waved the paper-filled document cover in the air. Angelica opened and closed her mouth. She was short of breath, and no words came to mind. Grabbing her firmly under the elbow, Ethan yanked the girl up and toward him, pulling her out of the stall. Took the bag away, pulled out his cell phone and tucked it into the pocket of his jeans, and then pulled out the wig. Raising an eyebrow, the man fixed his gaze on Angelica. The girl, her back pressed against the door of another stall, stared at him. She would have screamed, but then he clamped his palm over her mouth. His other hand went down on her neck, fixing her and making her think only of breathing. "Listen to me carefully. Now we're going to walk out of here and you're going to do what I say. Do you understand? No one here can help you. The police are bought. They're gonna bring you back, and they're gonna punish you. Believe me, you don't want to know how. But your friend will be punished first. Now tell me what you're up to." "Lucy." "Lucy has nothing to do with this." Angelica exhaled as he took his hand away from her mouth, clearly expecting a submissive response. "She doesn't know anything. I know why we're here. I want to. I don't want to." "Do you want to or don't you?" Ethan asked snidely, finally removing his hand from her neck. Angelica only now realized that they were alone in this room. "You don't work for anyone," he said thoughtfully and tossed the wig into the trash. Then, as if he had X-ray vision, he simply ripped open the lining of the bag and extracted the real passport. Angelica felt tears coming to her eyes, but she didn't even wipe them away. Wrapping her arms around herself, the girl was shaking like in a fever. Professionals don't behave so idiotically. What did you even expect? I was going to. Please. Let us go. We won't tell anyone. Please. I'm not falling for that. Ethan threw, finally returning the tattered purse. Please, Angelica repeated huffily, doomedly, and sniffled. For the first time since the moment she'd learned what the principal was doing, she was truly afraid. But fear did something good. It gave her the strength to fight. Angelica pretended to obediently leave the room. She walked ahead of the man and suddenly pushed the door back hard. Ethan grunted and grabbed his face. Vindictively hoping she had broken his nose, Angelica rushed out. I don't care what he said. Whoever these criminals were, they couldn't buy everyone, which meant they just had to try a little harder and never give up. Angelica ran without feeling her feet, flying forward, maneuvering between people, pushing whoever needed to be pushed out of the way. Jump! Behind her, there was an empty luggage cart and an airport employee who opened his mouth in surprise. Distantly, the girl thought about the fact that she could probably be detained by security, because it's weird if a person is running. Although maybe she was late for a flight. Finally, the glass doors opened in front of her and Angelica flew out into the cab stand. The hot and humid tropical air hit her in the face. The lush greenery was mixed with the smell of gasoline. Angelica froze. She didn't have any money because she had dropped her purse, dropped it at the door, and now she didn't have her passport either. How to pay for the cab? How do I explain myself to the local authorities? Several drivers, lazily waiting for passengers, were already looking at her with interest. Hi, where are you going? I take the cheapest. A dark-haired, curly-haired guy addressed her in a broken but native language and smiled broadly. Nodding, Angelica rushed to this car and dived into the front seat. Hurry up, please. The guy pushed his sunglasses down on his nose, smiled again, and nodded. Faster than this little girl is not on the island. Abruptly but smoothly he backed up, spun the steering wheel and drove out of the parking lot. Where to? I don't care. Away from here, Angelica blurted out. The idea that the first thing to do was to go to the police now seemed unforgivably naive and stupid. And what if she was unlucky and met just such a corrupt cop? Maybe they have some kind of department to fight human traffickers. Or should I call the police in a neighboring city instead? Is there a problem? The guy asked me sympathetically. My name is Mark. Angelica. Yes, it's happened. Just you. He waved his hand vaguely in the air. You ran like that. An angry husband? What makes you think so? Angelique was wary. Who else would such a beautiful woman run away from? Mark winked. My sister left her husband. Oh, tortured with him. I had to issue a restraining order. The guy's words gave me hope. Since he had first-hand knowledge of such things, perhaps he could help me, tell me what to do. So where are you going? He asked when the car stopped at a red light in the dense traffic on one of the central city streets. I'm really in trouble, Angelica said. I'm being stalked by a very bad man. I don't know anyone in this country and I'm afraid to go to the police. I don't know what to do. And I don't have the money to pay for a cab, she finished quite quietly, nervously rubbing with her finger a nail from which a piece of candy-colored polish had broken off. Wow. The guy wasn't smiling. He was getting serious, thinking hard about something. A foreigner in trouble. Angelica nodded. She wouldn't be surprised if he opened the door now and told her to get out and get out. But instead, the guy suddenly reached for her, his hand dropping to the girl's shoulder. I'll help. Come to my place, okay? And then we'll figure out what to do. Now Angelica could hardly believe her luck. The cab turned down a side street and headed toward the outskirts of the city into the residential and poorest neighborhoods. The cab stopped. Angelica got out and looked around. To the left, two old men were playing dominoes at a table under a funny striped umbrella with the imprinted logo of a famous soda maker. A red-haired dog dozed under the table. To the right, a woman sat on the porch and told a pregnant girl, gesticulating vigorously, who stretched out on her toes, hanging her washed laundry to dry. A flock of kids were racing a soccer ball with a cheerful homonym. Let's go. Mark beckoned Angelica after him and ran up the short stairs and unlocked the door. The girl found herself in a small apartment, where everything screamed for renovation. He flashed his white-toothed smile again and went into the kitchen. Angelica sighed and sank down on the sofa. The couch beneath her squeaked pitifully and introduced her heel to several springs. Mark returned with a couple of glasses and a bottle of some kind of drink. Lemonade, non-alcoholic, he explained. Angelica greedily drained the glass, then he poured another. So what's your problem? Should I call your parents or boyfriend? The girl told everything. That she was from an orphanage in a faraway country. That she had a friend at the airport. She told how she ran and hit the blonde monster with the door. You're a dangerous little thing. Mark chuckled and moved closer. His hand went over the back of the couch and down to Angelica's shoulder again. So you're all alone. You know, you need a man to take care of you. His words and body language alerted Angelica. Setting aside the fogged glass of lemonade, she moved to the side. Thanks for the ride. I think since there might be bot police here, I need to go to the next town. I'll go to the authorities there. That's a long way, Mark said. Well, okay, I'll take you in a couple days. What? Angelique almost jumped. No. Please understand, it's urgent. Lucy's left there with him. I can't wait. Well, I've got things to do, Mark shrugged. What's your hurry? Your friend, you say, took the job easily. Perhaps she knew where you were going. Lucy would never, what are you, saying such things? Angelica was indignant. She was beginning to think that Mark was not the simple, warm-hearted guy he seemed at first glance. But then the keys rustled behind the front door and it opened. Angelica was startled, jumping up. It turned out to be some girl, also dark, with long black hair. She was dressed in a parrot sundress, flip-flops, and with bags in both hands. Oh, she rolled her eyes. I told you to stop bringing your girlfriends to our house. That's my sister, Mark grimaced. Camille, don't start. She's not my girlfriend. This miss was in big trouble and I helped her out. There are bandits out there chasing her. Not ours, not the locals. Who would help you? Snorted Camilla, but she looked at Angelica less hostilely. Foreigner? I'm American, Angelica replied. Your brother saved me. I'm sorry, I'm disturbing you. But I won't be here long. I have to. Oh, not now. The brunette looked up to the ceiling again. I have to cook dinner. Aunt Bella's sick. The last couple of phrases were addressed to Mark. The husband has drunk his paycheck again. Paolo, Ferdy, and Toma are sitting hungry. So please, brother, stay out of my way. You, by the way, turned to Angelica and came over, extending her hand for a handshake. Have dinner with us too, and there you will tell everything. Good deeds are not done on an empty stomach. Angelica had to agree. She believed again that everything would work out. After all, right now she was lucky. After all, these people, having learned that she had big problems, and even of this kind, which involved crime, did not throw her out, and it seems that they were ready to help. Angelica offered her help to Camille, and she, after a little thought, called her into the kitchen and trusted her to cut vegetables and peel shrimp. Soon the rich, spicy flavor of the rice dish, reminiscent of pilaf, but with a thick, sour, and sweet gravy, wafted through the small apartment. Mark's sister immediately put most of the food away, repeating that she would take it to the neighbors for dinner. But first they sat down at the table themselves. Mark was taciturn, casting frowning glances at his sister. She seemed to be bothering him. Camilla made a renewed impression on Angelica. She turned out to be a positive and sympathetic girl, though she firmly rejected the idea of going to the police. No. She waved her finger under Angelica's nose. You'll be raked up in no time, and you'll be off to feed the fish. We have to get out of here. Call someone or sell some jewelry. She nodded at her unwilling guest's pendant and earrings. It's costume jewelry, Angelica explained. It cost me $300. I don't understand, Camille said. How much in dollars? Angelique translated roughly. Oh, then really, you better keep it, Mark's sister snorted. You're in for it, girlfriend. But you know what? We'll figure something out. In the meantime, you stay with us, and you, she pointed her fork at her brother. You keep your hands to yourself, okay? You think I can't see what you're thinking? Mark grimaced as if he'd bitten into a lemon, leaned lower over his plate, but nodded in agreement. After dinner, Camilla went out for a while to take food to the neighbors. She came back in a better mood than before, saying she'd already figured something out. My cousin's nephew is in the NCIS, catching poachers. He's a smart guy. I think he'll tell you what to do," Angelica said cheerfully, spreading clean linens on the sofa. "But now he's on shift, will return the day after tomorrow, then you'll talk. Until then, you'll stay with us. By the way, I have a friend here on the next street keeps a store. They just need a sales drill. I think you can make a little money for a couple of shifts. But I don't have any papers." "I don't care," Camilla said. "They don't ask questions of their own, and I'll bring you in. Come on, get out. The girls need to change their clothes." She waved her hands at her brother and literally pushed him playfully roughly into the kitchen, closed the door. Walking over to the closet, Camille began to go through things. "Here, pajamas and something else from my closet." She handed Angelica shorts, 2 t-shirts, a dress, and pajamas with dolphins. "Or you'll fry in your warm clothes in our heat. Take it, take it. Don't be shy. Oh, and here you go, samples. You can take the bathroom first. There's shampoo, toothpaste, and a new toothbrush lying around somewhere. Anyway, use it. If you need anything else, don't hesitate to ask." And she gave Angelica a friendly tap on the shoulder. "Thank you." Angelica furtively wiped away the tears. She was amazed that in a foreign country, she suddenly met people who responded to her misfortune. Not rich, very simple. They so generously shared everything they had. After taking a shower and changing for bed, the girl returned to her room. Mark, seeing her, sent a joking air kiss, for which he immediately received a smack from his sister. Angelica did not guess what awaited her tomorrow, only hoped that her luck was not exhausted by today's events and that tomorrow she would be able to move forward a little more, to be one step closer to obtaining freedom for herself, Lucy, and the other prisoners. As soon as Angelica's head touched the pillow, she immediately fell into sleep. In the middle of the night, Angelica jumped up, tangled in the plaid, and almost fell off the couch. She didn't immediately realize what was happening, and then she felt cold at the door, clearly hammered with fists and feet, swearing, and although not a word was understandable, it seems that they spoke in a language like Spanish, breaking clearly were angry. "What happened?" Angelica asked. She, hissed Camille, who was frozen at the door, also sleepy and confused, then turned to her brother. "What the hell is Enrique doing here?" "Sis, I wanted to tell you," Mark muttered, looking at the door, shuddering under the blows with eyes full of horror. "You did pay him back," Camille sort of claimed, but with a grim degree of doubt. "Well, I bought something else. I borrowed it again." Mark coughed and rubbed his forehead. "I'm sorry." "What? Oh, you. Are you sick of living?" Clenching her fists, Camille took a step toward her brother, but then stopped. She looked at Angelica. "So, get in the closet and be quiet as a mouse. What's going on?" Angelica was very scared. The door shook on its hinges under a new series of blows, and those behind it seemed to grow even angrier. Camille looked at Angelica pleadingly. "Do what I'm telling you. Enrique is crazy. He doesn't need to see a white doll like that." Nodding, Angelica did as the girl instructed. Diving into the closet and pressing herself against the back wall, Camilla closed the flaps. It was dark, smelled sweetly of perfume, and a slice of the room could be seen through a crack in the door. Camilla switched to the local language. It seemed to be Spanish after all. From the sounds, she opened the door. A heated, emotional dialogue ensued between the entrance and the host. Then there was a strange sound as something fell. Camilla cried out, and Mark groaned. He opened the door and Angelica obediently climbed in. She felt devastated, exhausted, broken. She just wanted to disappear, or at least not to feel, not to be afraid, not to hear, not to see anything. "Don't go anywhere, okay?" The man smiled and turned back to the gang. And then, coming close to Enrique, he simply punched him in the jaw with all his might. The leader groaned and sank down onto the road, but he did nothing in response. And none of his henchmen moved. They all knew they had the misfortune to accidentally hurt something that belonged to serious people. Ethan was very angry. In fact, he hadn't expected there to be any trouble with these girls. Ever since the plans had suddenly, to be more precise, for everyone but him, suddenly changed, everything had been going right. He had arranged for the goods to be moved to a safe place. It was even funny because the concept of a safe place for Ethan and those he had been working for lately were essentially absolute opposites. It was true that Angelica seemed different to him at first glance, like other girls who'd gotten into the same kind of stories, and he had seen a lot of them. Her friend Lucy, he knew all about her. Nay fool who believed in the fairy tale of a beautiful life. But Angelica made a strange and that irritated, incomprehensible impression. What to expect from her? And then suddenly this prank at the airport. The girl obviously knew why she was taken out, but this masquerade and the paper in the passport cover. What could this little girl, who only recently became an adult, be up to? The mere fact that she consciously took such a risk said that she was impossibly stupid or desperately brave. The only thing that was unclear was her motives. He was going to talk to her and find out, but she surprised again. The blow had been a good one, and now her face was adorned with a band-aid across her nose. Ethan had to stay late to take Lucy to the right place. The girl, by the way, at first worried about her friend, but then she was distracted by her own interests. Ethan told her that Angelica's luggage was found a couple of forbidden things. It was nothing serious, just seeds, but it was forbidden to bring seeds of plants to the islands. And while they would sort out that they were edible seeds and not for sowing, it would take some time. Lucy easily believed the lie. To get on the trail of the fugitive was easy, but still had to distract someone from the business partners. Ethan spent more than an hour feeding these people in advance carefully prepared information, which was far from real, and was able to go after Angelica only at night. And as it turned out, he was in time. The crying, disheveled girl looked very young and defenseless in those pajamas. Every now and then she cast frightened glances at him. Gritting his teeth, Ethan ordered himself to stop feeling sorry for her. He couldn't. It would only make things more difficult. He even tried to tell himself that what had happened would be good for Angelica. After a hard lesson, she would probably stop fooling around and getting into trouble. "Where are you taking me?" the girl asked quietly. "Don't you think that the questions here should be asked to me?" through a stern look. Angelica started to ask, but stopped talking and nodded. She lowered her gaze to her hands folded in her lap. She was just very scared. He was saying that she would be punished. Lucy would be punished. But even scarier was trying to talk to this man. Entering the city center, the car stopped at the service entrance to the Mermaid's Heart nightclub. It was the most expensive establishment of its kind in Jamaica, but it wasn't easy to get in. The main guests were foreigners and locals, but both had to first obtain a membership card, which was issued only by invitation to approved guests and required a generous entrance fee. Even from the corridor that connected the back rooms, the electronic music played in the club could be heard. None of the waiters and other staff who met along the way paid any attention to the girl in pajamas, who followed the man with her head dutifully lowered. Ethan led Angelica to the elevators and pressed the button for the 4th floor. The last 2 floors of the building were arranged as apartments for the owners of the establishment and especially important guests who needed confidential accommodation in the city. "Come in," Ethan said as Angelica lingered on the threshold of the apartment. Breathing heavily, the girl entered the huge room, the main element of which was a bed. No, I beg you." Turning to Ethan, Angelica groped for his jacket, tried to look into his eyes. "Please don't," he said something quickly. By the intonation of Camille, who spoke next, she was against it. A minute later, the closet doors opened, and for the second time in 24 hours, Angelica was dragged out of the small shelter. There was no chance of escape from the grip of this big man. Angelica looked at him with a nasty grin, wearing jeans and a leather vest that didn't fit over his fat belly. The man's arms, neck, and chest were covered in tattoos. "Asshole," spat out Camille in English. She stood beside her brother, who was sitting on the floor holding his stomach. "I'm sorry," turned to Angelica. He gave out. "What?" "Please, Enrique doesn't speak English," Camilla said. "Then translate it." Angelica begged. "I don't understand. Why would he want me? What's it got to do with me?" "My brother thought you would be good for the debt," Camille cried. "I'm sorry." "What? What's going on here?" Angelica struggled to get away, but Enrique seemed amused. Without any shame, he continued to hold her down and ran his hand over the figure from the front, then from behind. He licked his lips and growled something to his 2 gun-wielding friends. What? What does he want?" Angelica gasped in terror and panic. Your brother said you escaped from the traffickers, that you were alone. Enrique doesn't do that sort of thing, Camilla replied. But he agreed to wait on the debt, since Mark offered him such entertainment. I'm sorry. I swear I didn't know that thing was coming. Help, somebody, help. In her panic, Angelica didn't realize she'd switched to her native tongue. Enrique's fingers entwined predatorily in the girl's hair, forcing her head back. He shook the captive like a doll and shouted something. It was not necessary to know the local dialect to understand his command to be silent and not to resist. For some reason, his men laughed. I'm sorry, Camille looked away. Do what he says. Then you'll stay alive. Be obedient and he'll let you go. Then he'll let you go. Listen to me, please. Enrique knows how to break people. He's the boss. Just accept it and bear it. Angelica sobbed and squeezed her eyes shut. Enrique led her to the exit of the apartment, down the stairs to the street. His men followed step by step. The night brought the long-awaited coolness for this corner of the world, and the fresh breeze from the sea seemed to carry particles of salt settling on her lips and the sky. Angelica thought aloofly that she smelled of the sea, and that her own tears made her mouth salty. There was not a soul on the street. Were they sleeping or hiding to avoid Enrique's eyes? For some reason, it seemed to Angelica that people were watching what was happening, hiding in their apartments behind curtains and lights off. It was terribly strange, but for some reason the girl thought that Ethan, of course, is also a bastard. But with Enrique, it is impossible to agree on anything. He will not spare. Angelica realized that now she was going to be put in the car. And then, fear hit her nerves, generated a surge of adrenaline, and the girl squealed, bumping into the sidewalk with her feet. Slipper flew off her left foot. Bare feet burned on the stones. Suddenly, a car appeared from the corner at full speed, crashed into the side of Enrique's car, literally throwing it aside. There was a scraping of metal and the sound of shattered glass. The bandit leader and his men screamed and shouted, forgetting about their prey. Angelica lost her balance and fell to the sidewalk, hurting her palms on the paving stones. The shocked girl's eyes widened when she saw who stepped out of the black SUV. Ethan, roaring at the thugs he approached, ignoring the gun pointed at him. He also had a gun in his hand, but the barrel was down low for now. Angelica did not understand what they were talking about, but at some point Enrique suddenly raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture and told his men to put their weapons away. Now his voice sounded guilty, even ingratiating. Ethan walked past the gang and squatted down next to Angelica. How was the walk, little girl? Instead of answering, Angelica sniffed her nose and burst into tears. Who would have thought you'd cause so much trouble? He helped her up and led her to his car. He opened the door and Angelica obediently climbed in. She felt devastated, exhausted, broken. She just wanted to disappear, or at least not to feel, not to be afraid, not to hear, not to see anything. Don't go anywhere, okay? The man smiled and turned back to the gang. And then, coming close to Enrique, he simply punched him in the jaw with all his might. The leader groaned and sank down onto the road, but he did nothing in response. And none of his henchmen moved. They all knew they had the misfortune to accidentally hurt something that belonged to serious people. Ethan was very angry. In fact, he hadn't expected there to be any trouble with these girls. Ever since the plans had suddenly, to be more precise, for everyone but him, suddenly changed, everything had been going right. He had arranged for the goods to be moved to a safe place. It was even funny because the concept of a safe place for Ethan and those he had been working for lately were essentially absolute opposites. It was true that Angelica seemed different to him at first glance, like other girls who'd gotten into the same kind of stories, and he had seen a lot of them. Her friend Lucy, he knew all about her. Knave fool who believed in the fairy tale of a beautiful life. But Angelica made a strange and that irritated, incomprehensible impression. What to expect from her? And then suddenly this prank at the airport. The girl obviously knew why she was taken out, but this masquerade and the paper in the passport cover. What could this little girl, who only recently became an adult, be up to? The mere fact that she consciously took such a risk said that she was impossibly stupid or desperately brave. The only thing that was unclear was her motives. He was going to talk to her and find out, but she surprised again. The blow had been a good one. and now her face was adorned with a band-aid across her nose. Ethan had to stay late to take Lucy to the right place. The girl, by the way, at first worried about her friend, but then she was distracted by her own interests. Ethan told her that Angelica's luggage was found a couple of forbidden things. It was nothing serious, just seeds, but it was forbidden to bring seeds of plants to the islands. And while they would sort out that they were edible seeds and not for sowing, it would take some time. Lucy easily believed the lie. To get on the trail of the fugitive was easy, but still had to distract someone from the business partners. Ethan spent more than an hour feeding these people in advance carefully prepared information, which was far from real, and was able to go after Angelica only at night. And as it turned out, he was in time. The crying, disheveled girl looked very young and defenseless in those pajamas. Every now and then she cast frightened glances at him. Gritting his teeth, Ethan ordered himself to stop feeling sorry for her. He couldn't. It would only make things more difficult. He even tried to tell himself that what had happened would be good for Angelica. After a hard lesson, she would probably stop fooling around and getting into trouble. "Where are you taking me?" the girl asked quietly. "Don't you think that the questions here should be asked to me?" through a stern look. Angelica started to ask, but stopped talking and nodded. She lowered her gaze to her hands folded in her lap. She was just very scared. He was saying that she would be punished. Lucy would be punished. But even scarier was trying to talk to this man. Entering the city center, the car stopped at the service entrance to the Mermaid's Heart nightclub. It was the most expensive establishment of its kind in Jamaica, but it wasn't easy to get in. The main guests were foreigners and locals, but both had to first obtain a membership card, which was issued only by invitation to approved guests and required a generous entrance fee. Even from the corridor that connected the back rooms, the electronic music played in the club could be heard. None of the waiters and other staff who met along the way paid any attention to the girl in pajamas, who followed the man with her head dutifully lowered. Ethan led Angelica to the elevators and pressed the button for the 4th floor. The last 2 floors of the building were arranged as apartments for the owners of the establishment and especially important guests who needed confidential accommodation in the city. "Come in," Ethan said as Angelica lingered on the threshold of the apartment. Breathing heavily, the girl entered the huge room, the main element of which was a bed. No, I beg you." Turning to Ethan, Angelica groped for his jacket, tried to look into his eyes. "Please don't." "Calm down," he gently unhooked the girl's hands. "I'm not going to do any of the things you imagined. Right now, I just want to talk to you, okay?" And then Angelica sobbed. "Then what?" "Please, no. You want, like me?" She lowered her eyes, blushing. "I don't have any experience. I don't have any experience at all." "What?" "I had a headache, and 2 days on my feet with no sleep was not exactly invigorating." "What are we going to do with you?" "I'm not dragging you to bed," the man said irritably. "Really?" A spark of hope made the girl's heart beat faster. "You won't punish me? And Lucy? What about her? I want to see her." "You'll see your friend, but first we'll talk," said Ethan uncompromisingly. "Now let's go." After calming down a little, Angelica obediently followed. The man led her into the bathroom, took out the first aid kit. "Give me your hands and the leg." "It's okay," Angelica said. "It almost doesn't hurt at all." "You can do it yourself," Ethan squinted. "But I think it will be quicker and easier for me. Give me your hands for starters. I won't bite you." I had to agree. Angelica only yelped a couple of times, but then her palms and feet felt better when the scraped places were covered with some ointment and bandages. "Sit down," Ethan told her when the bandaging was done and they were back in the room. Still cautiously squinting at the bed, Angelica sat down on the couch by the window. Ethan sat on the opposite side of the sofa, assuming that some space between them would help her to feel more free. But what kind of freedom in her situation could she even talk about? "So tell me." "What?" the girl squeaked. She was scared again. "That's it," sighed Ethan, rubbed the bridge of his nose. The blow came out really strong. "Who are you and what kind of? Why did you take the job in the first place? When and where did you decide to run? Tell me everything and believe me. I'll understand if you're lying. There's no reason to believe me, of course. But you just know I'm the only one who can help you and your friend if you tell it like it is." Angelica nodded and spoke, but it was easier now than it had been for Camille and her brother. The language barrier didn't hold her back, and besides, she didn't think that some details weren't important. Finishing the story, she even began to think that perhaps she had said too much. In fact, why should this man know that she had no parents, that she wanted to study to be an accountant? It was completely unnecessary. Angelica did not forget to tell that she heard from the principal the name of a man and named all the girls who left the orphanage with her help. "You are brave," said Ethan, "to do that all alone. Unfortunately, I have not heard anything about a girl named Selena, but I will try to find out something." "Thank you," Angelica sighed. "Why are you doing this?" The question rolled off her tongue before she could think. Stupid question. What could such a man answer? Angelica wanted to slap herself on the cheeks for the fact that during the story, as if she had forgotten that before her is not a sympathetic savior, and the one who himself does all these terrible things. Ruthless slave trader, a monster in human form. There was something strange in Ethan's eyes, as if only a moment ago he'd been different. And now he was back to the hard, cynical man she'd known at the airport. "You mustn't say anything to your friend. I'm seriously warning you. If anyone else finds out about all this, you'll be killed. I'm not kidding. And I can't help you. Can't you just let us go?" Angelica swallowed hard. "I understand you don't want to let go, so I'll report you and then you and what you're doing to the authorities. But what if we just leave? If we just fly away and don't tell anyone?" Ethan pitched forward. Just in an instant, he was so close that Angelica felt his breath on her cheeks. His fingers touched her face, tracing her cheekbones one by one, and finally closed on her chin. "You think someone who traffics in girls would believe that?" "No," she whispered, and for some reason her heart thumped so fast, but not out of fear. In her very short life, Angelica had not had much contact with the opposite sex. There were, of course, peers, but no one she was really close to. Not a single date. Angelica didn't care if she was teased with ice. But what was happening now? It seemed to the girl that her own body was betraying her, and the fact that it was doing it to Ethan. It made Angelica feel so much burning disgust, contempt for herself. How could this be? Abruptly shaking her head so that her hair draped over her face, she pressed herself into the armrest at least a couple of centimeters away from the man. "What's going to happen to us next?" "Us?" "No," Ethan interrupted the nasty assumptions that were about to be voiced. "There were some complications. The new girls have been put on hold until things calm down. There's a couple weeks. You'll be here. You're too valuable. Luxury goods, if you ask me." "How much am I worth?" Angelica grinned bitterly. "Depends on what it's for," the man said thoughtfully, and the girl shrugged her shoulders. She didn't want to know any details. Otherwise, she would definitely lose it. And she wouldn't know how to breathe at all, to exist further without drowning in the nightmarish, inevitable anticipation of her fate. "In fact, the owner of the club wants to pay you for being a guest here," Ethan grinned. He was angry again, at himself, for giving in to the impulse to touch her. There were many women in his life, all kinds of women, passionate and shy. But the feelings that this girl, just a girl, it was unlike anything he had ever known before. And it was annoying, because it made you lose control of yourself, his thoughts and desires. Ethan realized that now, when they were almost there. Too much depended on the success of the part of the plan entrusted to him. He had no right to make a mistake. And this little girl was forcing him to feel something different from what he was supposed to feel. "What kind of payment?" Angelique asked. "For you to work, to dance." I said, "You're not dancers." He says you'll learn from more experienced girls. Your friend, by the way, has already agreed. "What?" Angelique exclaimed. Lucy thought she was going to be a chef. "You should trust her less, no offense," the man said. "She's a good girl, perhaps, but the prospect of making money and, as she says, finding a patron, is turning her head." Angelica pressed her lips together. She didn't like the rude things Ethan said about her friend, but she couldn't help but admit that he was right about something. Lucy hadn't considered this option as just honest labor from the beginning. She'd always wanted to make a good living, taking advantage of her youth and beauty. "I'll help you, and your friend. I'll risk it for you, but damn it." Rising abruptly, Ethan strode across the room and finally stopped in front of the girl, standing with his arms folded across his chest. "I'll help you," he repeated calmly, but there was a steely determination in his voice. "Don't ask questions, just listen, okay?" Angelica nodded. The meaning of what he said was mixed with the impressions of the experience, but the girl realized that she believed. She just believes what this man says. You won't ask the wolf why he changed his mind about eating you. You just accept it as a fait accompli and try to get away. "Don't go anywhere," the man said. "I'll be right back. I'll bring food and some things." Angelica nodded again. When Ethan returned a couple hours later, he found her still sitting on the couch and seemingly unchanged, but he didn't say anything. He threw a large plastic bag on the couch and placed a small paper bag on the coffee table beside it. "Eat." Angelica nodded again and timidly reached for the bag. "Damn it, did you swallow your tongue?" "Sorry," she blinked often and pulled her hand away from the bag. "I thought I'd better keep quiet." "You better be quiet and not do anything stupid," the man said coldly. "I didn't shut you up. Eat hamburgers and fries, orange juice. But if you're a vegetarian or need a gluten-free meal..." "No, thank you, I'm fine," Angelica replied, and finally, no longer embarrassed, hurriedly unwrapped the food. How hungry she was. She was ashamed of her wolfish appetite. It's indecent to want to eat in such a situation. She was distracted from devouring the food by clicking noises and looking at Ethan. She almost choked as he was checking his weapon. "Don't be afraid," he said, but that, of course, was of no use at all in the present situation. Angelica could only be a little less afraid, not more, and in general, it seemed to her that this sticky, tart taste of terror would never leave her. And even when everything was over, if of course everything ended safely, she would never be able to live as she had previously wished and dreamed of living freely and easily. "I have to leave. I'll be back in about 5 or 6 hours. You should get some sleep." He pointed to the bed. "The linens are clean. Clothes in a bag. There's even underwear finished as tactfully as possible." Some of the girls shared their new unworn clothes. "I hope I got the right size." "Okay, I'm leaving. If they knock, don't open the door and stay hidden." "Okay, Ethan." I called him at the door. "Thank you," exhaled, meeting the man's gaze. "Thank you for helping." He froze. He gritted his teeth and grinned wickedly. "I'm going to regret this." Angelica was not offended by the answer, and she did not want to do anything that would make him regret that he had decided to help or even change his mind. But the waiting was unbearable. The girl lay down to sleep, and when she woke up, it was dark outside the window again. Angelica woke up from a nightmare realistic, as if everything was happening in reality. In it, Selena and Lucy were crying and calling for her help. They were being dragged somewhere in the dark by cruel people whose faces could not be seen. And now Angelica could not get rid of the thought that Lucy was really in danger. Where is she? Sitting quietly in the room allotted to her? Or had that soulless man already made her dance for the amusement of the audience? Angelica forgot everything that Lucy said. Now she thought only about one thing. Her friend must have already guessed that they were not taken out for honest labor. Lucy is probably afraid. She feels bad. And that meant that she had to find her and calm her down, to tell her that everything would be all right, to share what Ethan had promised not to give an offense. Opening the bag, she feared to find some shameless evening gown, and so it was. It contained a silver-colored mini dress with thin straps, and a long-sleeved black knit cardigan, and the shoes that matched the dress were on crazy high heels. Hastily tidying herself up, the girl left the room. She closed the door. The automatic lock on the handle clicked quietly. Angelica twisted it back. There was no way to get in. Whoops. Now we have to look for not only Lucy, but Ethan as well. The girl decided not to use the elevator and went down the stairs. The stairs led to some dark corner, from which Angelica went straight to the club. Blinded, deafened for a moment while her perception adapted to the roaring music and accompanying multicolored flashes of light. How she forgot to ask where her friend was. But maybe it was around here? Or she could ask the girls working here if they had seen her. Angelica thought for the first time about who they were, these girls. Did they come to work here voluntarily? To twist like this, wriggling on the stage under hungry stares? To serve cocktails to rude guests who think that everything can be bought? Or are they prisoners too? If the former, Angelica sighed no, she could never understand how it was possible to volunteer for such a thing. Excuse me, I'm looking for a friend of mine, a waitress in a black leather mini dress. Her name's Lucy, tall, red hair. Oh, said the girl with a wide smile, lazily chewing her gum, which must have been strawberry flavored because she smelled like strawberries. She's in the VIP office. I think it's the third one. It's there. Waved her hand with such a long and sharp manicure that it was scary to imagine how she lives with such a thing. Thanking for the answer, Angelica headed in the direction indicated. Passing through the dance floor, the girl involuntarily delayed. The crowd moved sharply. There were too many people. Anna, Angelica threw off the waist of someone's insolent hands, but a moment later found herself attracted from behind to another male body. New girl? A hoarse baritone sounded above her ear. Let go. Get off. Angelica fought back indignantly. Abruptly, she pulled her hands off her hips, but she was grabbed by the waist, turned abruptly. A man about 40 years old, with a narrow strip of black mustache and goatee, in a white suit and black, with some glowing in the dark print shirt. I like bold. He grinned and tried to draw her into a dance. Angelica had promised herself to be careful, not to get into trouble, as Ethan had said. But now it was like a volcano. Smiling wickedly, the girl with all her might stepped with her heel on the stranger's foot, and when he, puzzled by the flash of pain, lost his grip on her body, rushed away. Fuck you. In the swamp, she snorted and got lost among the dancers, who did not seem to pay any attention to what had happened. Finally, after asking another waiter for directions, Angelica found the VIP rooms. In fact, there were separate small rooms, in each of which there was a soft sofa in the shape of a seashell against the wall, as well as a long counter table. But most of the space was occupied by an individual dance floor for a girl who gave the client the kind of performance he wanted to see. Angelica froze before reaching her hand to the door. What to do? Knock and say she needed to talk to Lucy. Nonsense, of course, but maybe it would be better to wait until her friend came out. My heart clenched with a bad feeling, which meant that Lucy had already been made into a dancer. What a nightmare. And naturally, they threatened her, forced her, but then the familiar, gushing laughter of her friend sounded from the office, and then Ethan's voice. Angelica, without delay, rushed inside and just opened her mouth at what she saw. A man was sitting on a sofa, some papers were scattered on the table in front of him, and Lucy was standing on the dance floor. The girl was in a red sequined outfit that looked very much like a bikini swimsuit. Her knee was neatly in front of Ethan's nose. Angelica felt a painful prick. Jealousy? How silly. And yet it was something strange and very much like her. She suddenly realized that it disgusted her to see Ethan in such close, shamelessly close company of another woman. It didn't matter if it was a friend or someone else. What was going on here? Angelica wanted to ask what was going on, but the words were stuck in her throat and she was confused. No, of course, it would be silly to expect decent behavior from someone like Ethan. But he promised he'd protect them. And now he's just a monster. He decided to have fun with a poor girl. Ethan stood up. The look on his face didn't promise anything good. I thought I told you to be quiet and keep your head down. I'm sorry, Angelica said. I just wanted to see my friend. You did so. Lucy joined the conversation. Angelica, get away. You're bothering us. Angelica looked at her friend in shock. Only now she realized that Lucy did not look like a person who had been dressed up by force. That is, almost stripped and made to dance. She looked haughty and displeased at the same time, pouted her lips, and cast strange glances at Ethan. The man rolled his eyes and turned to the dancer. Lucy, you're free. But we're not done yet. The redhead swayed her hips seductively, her slender fingers sliding along the pole. Let her go. I'll show you what I can do. I've seen enough, the man snorted out. With a hurt look on her face, Lucy got down and walked past Angelica, shoving her with her shoulder. Lucy, the girl rushed after her friend. What's going on? What's going on? And you're still asking me? Hissed the girl, turning around sharply. You're so modest and innocent, a gray mouse, and already grabbed a piece of fat. Lucy, Angelica did not recognize her friend. What's the matter with you? Don't you understand? We were not brought here to work honestly. I know. She nodded and Angelica recoiled as if she'd been hit. The owner of the club said that girls on such job offers usually come for other work. Yeah, I know. Can you believe it? And you know what? What? Angelica echoed in shock deafeningly. I'm fine with it. You think I just want to work for cents? No, I want a nice happy life, you know? I want to dress in boutiques, never go hungry. I'll make enough for an apartment in a month. Lucy, no one is gonna pay you. And even if they did, even if one of the girls got a lot, don't you realize what they're in for? What they're doing? It's unthinkable. It's disgusting. They want to use you like a thing. Yeah, look at you, you're right, the former good friend said snidely. You think I don't know what you're trying to do? She's got Ethan all to herself. Look at her. She's sneaky, isn't she? Of course, why would you give up the little things when he's the only boss around here? What? Did you show him what you can do? Did you try? How did he like it? You're experienced now. You can probably share the secret of how to make a man. Angelica didn't think about what she'd done. Just her hand flew into the air, and the next moment it whipped down on Lucy's cheek. The girl gasped and clutched her face, her eyes filled with tears. I hate it, she shouted and rushed away. Angelica stood, barely breathing and staring at the empty place where her friend had been before. She did not immediately notice how Ethan stood next to her. I'm sorry, said and touched her shoulder. Damn you, shook off his touch, which was unbearable now. You weren't sorry when she was twirling around in front of you. That's what you're doing, isn't it? I had to go through some papers. The owner of the club said he wanted an opinion on what the new girl can do. He wants to put her dancing in 3 days. I just watched and now I can tell him that she's no good, that her choreography is disgusting. If I said no, he'd have his son evaluate the new girl. They run the club together, and he'd go beyond dancing and interview her in his own style. So, yeah, what I did was important. But what you did, Ethan was angry again. Damn it. Not only was this girl threatening to ruin his hard-won plans and strategies when she acted so rashly, forcing him to defend her beyond his original plan, but she was also annoying. Ethan was used to living in his legend, and it did not include such nuances of behavior as the need to justify himself to anyone or to repeat his orders twice. And the fact that he had to do it now, and moreover, putting the entire mission at risk of failure. It was getting on his nerves, but by sheer force of will, he managed to get himself under control again. He sent Angelica a smile of superiority, condescension, threat. I'll walk you back, baby, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to lock you up just to be sure. Angelica raised her chin stubbornly. All right, go ahead. I wouldn't expect anything else from someone like you. But one day everything will boomerang back to you. Everything you do is the law of fate. I hope so. The man growled and gently pushed the girl forward, slapping her lower back. Stomp. Don't you dare touch me. Angelica shrieked and turned around to swing again. But Ethan intercepted her arm, gently but firmly. Stop. I overreacted. I apologize. In order for you to get out of this, we have to work together, okay? Angelica wanted to say that she agreed to tolerate his unbearable company, which made her appetite disappear and goosebumps slid strangely over her body, agreed to tolerate him, but only for the sake of salvation. But she didn't have time. New faces appeared in the corridor near VIP offices, a man in a white suit, who became Angelica's unlucky partner on the dance floor, and a couple of his bodyguards. There you are, sweetie, he smiled at Angelica. I confess, no girl has ever done that to me before. But you know what? Oh no. The girl hurriedly, in the blink of an eye, literally, a jittery bunny was behind Ethan's back. I'm sorry, please. I was in a hurry and yes, I was rude. I'm sorry. And I was wondering who she was. The man continued smiling, his hands spread. And Jack tells me that she's a fly-by-night bird at his club, which, what a pity, doesn't belong to him. But here's the thing, the smile faded and now only the eyes were laughing. Only in those eyes, as Angelica could swear by her own rapidly beating heart, there was nothing kind. They were thirsty for something dark and wrong. What I need, I take, the man continued, and turned his gaze to Ethan. I'm buying it. What? Angelica grabbed the sleeve of Ethan's jacket in an already painfully desperate gesture. The girl is not for sale, the blonde replied. At least not right now. She's good, as you, Richter, have noticed. There's an auction waiting for her, and if you wish to participate in it, well, we will be glad to see you among the bidders. I guess you misunderstood me. The man Richter called, who clearly belonged to the criminal world, was blocking the corridor with his big men. He didn't speak, but his posture and disposition demonstrated that he wouldn't let them leave so easily. I'm buying it. Give me a final probable price and I'll double it. I need the girl now. Angelica felt as if she would faint. It would be so wonderful, a saving oblivion. I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. Ethan stretched lazily. The girl is already booked. Really? How interesting. Richter splashed his hands. You don't often meet this kind of birds. And who is this hunter, may I ask? We guarantee our customers' confidentiality, the blonde replied. In his intonation, there were growling, menacing notes, but his rival only grinned and lazily, as if correcting, ran his fingers through his mustache and beard. Yes, I know your sensitivity in this matter, but I repeat, I know how to get what I want. The girl is mine. I'll take care of that anonymous buyer myself, and I'll compensate you for the damage to your reputation, of course. Don't worry, Bertie. Richter's attention was now focused on Angelica. She could almost physically feel his eager gaze. Don't be afraid, he repeated, and in those words sounded a pure, unmasked threat. I'll take care of you. We'll have a lot of fun. Richter stepped forward. He had intended to just bypass Ethan. He reached out to Angelica. The girl's gaze locked onto the bracelet on Richter's arm. It was a leather black strap with many pendants, which looked strange for a man. It looked like rings, earrings, pendants, women's jewelry. And among them, Angelica noticed one of the largest. It was a silver pendant with a pinkish scarlet stone in the shape of a drop. It was the same pendant Selena wore. It was a gift from her grandmother. Selena said it was an ancient family piece of jewelry. Angelica stared at it in disbelief. The jewelry could be similar, couldn't they? Where did you get it? She asked. What? Richter raised an eyebrow, shook his hand with the bracelet. No reason. I like, things with history. A pendant with a red stone. Angelica exhaled. Where did you get it? Why do you ask, baby? Grinned Richter. But if you're interested, I'll tell you. When we are not disturbed by outsiders. Come on, let's go. We have to go. It was only because Richter had not expected any resistance, especially here on his own territory, that Ethan managed to take him by surprise. He sent the man flying into the wall with a powerful blow to the jaw, and then before they could get up, he quickly dispatched the two guards, pulling Angelica by the arm and dragging her into a side corridor behind an inconspicuous door. Ethan barely managed to exhale on the run. He stopped, turned to her, squeezed her shoulders painfully and shook her, burning her, piercing her with his gaze. Shut up. Damn you. Come with me now. Do you understand? I can't hear you. Poe, understood. Stammering, the girl replied. The corridor ended in a door. Locked. Cussing, Ethan stepped back, drew his gun, and fired several shots into the lock. Swinging the door open, they were now in the alley. This way. Angelica followed obediently. Wait, I can't stop. It was all the same, it would make her even more angry. But to run in stilettos was impossible to continue with each step. She just risked breaking her legs. Taking off her shoes, Angelica again rushed to run. After crossing the alley, they found themselves in a parking lot. It seemed to belong to a hotel. Get out of the way, Ethan shouted, pushing the parking lot attendant aside. Get in. The new order was addressed to Angelica, to whom the man was also holding out a motorcycle helmet. I don't know how to, began Angelica, confused. With a short curse, Ethan himself put the helmet on her head and roughly tightened the strap. I wouldn't trust you. You ruin everything you touch. Get in the back now. Without another word, the girl did as he commanded. She wrapped her arms around him and squeezed her eyes shut. Angelica had never ridden a motorcycle in her life, and this first experience was just awful. The vehicle wiggled, tilting dangerously, and the girl opened her eyes. Oh, she had done it in vain. The motorcycle went into the roadway, at this hour not crowded at all, and those who met, fortunately, had time to bounce aside. But the fruit vendor was not lucky. Angelica cried out when the motorcycle at full speed crashed into the boxes with some colorful fruits, splitting them into splinters, grinding them into juicy, splashing crumbs. "We have to go back," the girl shouted, trying to block the roar of the wind and the engine. Ethan did not answer. "We have to go back for Lucy." "Ethan, stop." The girl started pounding on her back with her fist. But of course, the man did not pay any attention to such a time and force. Angelica continued to cling to him with her other hand. Finally, the motorcycle braked sharply at the guard post of a mansion. A black guard peered out of the booth and asked Ethan something in a language Angelica didn't even recognize as Spanish. He heard the answer and nodded and opened the gate. Another short burst of speed and the motorcycle stopped at the porch. Jumping off, Ethan helped Angelica off. The girl, whimpering softly, still could not undo the clasp on her helmet. "Woe is you." Ethan gritted his teeth, helped to remove the helmet, and noticed how she ashamedly pulls up her skirt, which had fallen up indecently during the ride, snidely remarked, "Who needs you? Come on." "Where are we?" the girl asked confusedly. This place looked like a respectable house of some rich people, and also an embassy, judging by the flags and some coats of arms on the walls. To Angelica's amazement, it turned out to be an embassy. True, Ethan named the country she had never heard of. "A very small island country," he explained. "Now you are safe. Be happy. And at the same time you set me up. Because of you I failed the mission." Saying all this, he stepped on her and she retreated until her back hit some bushes. The bushes were thorny and the fragrance was deafeningly fragrant from the huge rose-like flowers that covered them. Angelica stood frozen and almost breathless. She looked at the man in front of her and a storm of feelings rumbled in her heart. Disbelief that she was finally saved. A timid hope that it was really over. But how? What's going on? And then there was the resentment. For some reason, she felt sick to her stomach at how much Ethan had been rude to her lately. She didn't deserve any of it. Angelica lost her strength and covered her face with her palms and cried bitterly. She could hardly feel what was happening next. Some people came out of the embassy. She was escorted inside. Someone put a warm plate on her shoulders and brought her a glass of water. Some man who called himself a doctor asked how she was feeling. At the edge of the perception of the surrounding reality continued to be present Ethan. He was talking to an elderly, respectable gentleman in a black business suit with a narrow stripe. And then he said something and took the remote control from the TV and turned it on. On a huge half-wall screen, there was a news bulletin showing that the club was surrounded on all sides by the police. People were being let out, some of them handcuffed. Richard was among them. What is it?" Angelica asked, wiping her tears with a paper napkin. The man in the striped suit addressed her in English and explained that just now, in cooperation with the local authorities, key figures involved in international human trafficking had been arrested. They had been taken right at the airport, and local criminals who helped them had also been taken. And this club had always been considered the heart of their gatherings. Ethan stared at the screen. He was silent and somber. "I was supposed to be there. What's going on anyway?" He turned irritably to the older gentleman. "The mission is still a whole week away. What's that supposed to mean?" "There have been some changes," he replied calmly. "We did not have time to give you this information. But the mission had to be completed urgently, so as not to miss key figures. But personally, by the way, there are no claims against you." He threw a sympathetic look at Angelica. "Yes, you clearly violated the entire protocol of the mission, but you acted under the circumstances. We didn't count on the fact that our plan would include such a young person." "What are you talking about?" Angelica sniffed her nose. "What mission? I feel like I'm in a stupid action movie." "What are you? Some kind of agents?" "That's right, young lady," smiled the gray-haired gentleman. "As fate would have it, it was in our little country that let's say a special organization was created, and we do that sometimes. We take part in missions in order to eradicate the evil, which, unfortunately, so much in the modern world. You wonder why I say so calmly all this to you. Well, first of all, even if you told anyone, no one would believe you. The yellow papers. Well, they write about UFOs too. Another conspiracy theory, but your testimony, young lady, can be extremely valuable to you. Ethan told me that you gave him the name of the final buyer. You know the people to whom you and your friend were to be sold. We'll need everything you know. I hope you won't refuse our cooperation. And we, in turn, will make sure to protect you while the final stage of our case takes place. You're a valuable witness, young lady. Angelica jumped. My friend stayed at the club. Don't worry, the man in charge stopped her. We've notified whoever needs to know that she's a victim. She's safe. And like you, she'll be able to go home soon. So you're not a slave trader? Angelica turned to Ethan. You were just pretending. Yes, Ethan nodded and looked away from her. Ethan is one of our best agents. For several years, he participated in missions when girls in different countries were helped to escape. But lately, he has been working, as you correctly understood, as an undercover agent. Thanks to this, we managed to gain access to a number of important documents, gather information that allowed us to organize the detention of key figures. We sometimes cooperate with the authorities of a number of countries, and so at this stage, he had to protect from the real sale, the last batch of live goods, which is you. And fortunately, he succeeded. You took that man, Richter. Angelique was visibly shaken. I saw a bracelet on his arm and a pendant on it. That's my friend Selena's pendant. She's missing. I know, the gray-haired man sighed. Ethan had already relayed your story to us. I personally verified the information. We determined that Selena was sold to Canada. No. Angelica shook her head. Have a seat, miss, the man continued. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to say this. Richard is wearing that bracelet for a reason. Everything you've seen on it, it once belonged to girls, who he bought, but who refused to obey. He didn't say it directly, but the hints were enough to make the terrible truth hit, to make you repeat in your mind, no, it's not true. Soon we will have proof. Richard will probably try to make a deal with the investigation, and then we will be able to speak accurately, but I'm afraid. No, not Selena. Angelica gasped, dark circles dancing before her eyes. She had already been through a lot. She was scared for herself, very scared. But she had never imagined that it could be so painful to think that Selena, that she was no longer in the world. It wasn't true. She couldn't have died like that. She has a grandmother. Her grandmother is waiting for her. No, it's not true. It's not true. Angelica let herself go. She didn't have to be strong anymore. She cried for a very long time. She was soothed and given some tea that made her body feel better, and she also wanted to sleep. And then other events began. For the next 3 months, Angelica stayed in Jamaica. Long and tiring for her, as a witness and a victim, actions took almost all her free time. And when she was not busy, Angelica just slept or sat, staring at one point for a long time. At some point, Ethan again yelled at her and insisted that she had to start seeing a psychologist or she would sink in her condition. The girl agreed, actually, not really counting on any result. And it helped. Slowly, she was able to come to her senses. With Lucy, they hardly saw each other. No, she was fine too. They talked a couple of times. But there was no trace of the former friendship. Frankly warm. The old man, who introduced himself as Victor, told Angelica 2 months later that Naomi, the orphanage's principal, had died. An acute heart attack overtook the woman when she realized that her crimes had been solved. The girls freed from slavery by means of a mysterious and still seemed to Angelique very strange organization were going home. The press had already started to talk about what had happened, but Victor, as promised, had arranged everything so that Angelica's name would not appear in any newspaper. She knew that some things still had to deal with when she returned home, but she promised herself that she would be strong and cope with everything. Angelica was energized by the thought that the orphanage she had come from now had a new director, a man, according to reliable rumors, who was really good. Read the documents, miss, Victor said, laying out some papers in front of her. At this hour, as the sun was slowly sinking behind the horizon line into the sea, Angelica was sitting on the balcony of her room at the embassy and simply, as usual, was immersed in her thoughts. We have managed to reach an agreement. Some of the confiscated funds belonging to the top of the criminal organization are now being given as compensation to the victims. In other words, you, as well as the other girls, are entitled to some compensation. I don't want that money. Angelica shook her head. You can think about it, but if you want to hear my advice, it's better to agree. You can, by the way, if you wish, later redirect them to charity. After a few days, Angelique agreed. True, the feelings were twofold. After all, it was, in fact, dirty money. But after a few more visits to a psychologist, Angelica agreed that she was entitled to moral compensation. Finally, all the formalities were over. Angelica could go home. She had never had a real home and had bitter doubts that after what she had been through, she would ever be able to live a full life. But she also realized that she had to be strong again, no matter what. Ethan sometimes came by to tell some news, to consult on something. Angelica did not avoid him, but did not show that she was glad, because all the sparks of feeling that had previously excited her, that this man had awakened in her, it was all gone. On her last day in Jamaica, Ethan volunteered to escort Angelica to the airport. And there, when it was time for her to go to the landing, he suddenly caught her by the hand and she turned to him. I wish we had met otherwise, he said. Angelica, don't say anything, please, whispered the girl. I am grateful to you for everything, but we couldn't have been together. For you live your work. I can understand you. You're saving people, doing something very important. Only we wouldn't have been able to be happy. But I thank you for everything. He listened to every word in silence, and then he nodded, and the next moment he drew her closer to him, very close, and covered the girl's lips with his own. It was sweet, dizzying, overwhelming, and Angelica's first kiss. And when it was over, Angelica didn't want to go anywhere. More than anything, she wanted to just stay with Ethan, but she couldn't do that. And so the girl smiled at him, and then swallowing Un's tears, pulled away. Goodbye, she said, and turned around and hurried down the corridor to board the plane, feeling that if she delayed even a little longer, she would simply lose her way. The money she received was enough to pay for her education. Angelica decided not only to learn to be an accountant to start working, but also to enter the university, choosing a specialty from the economic sphere. It was enough to buy a 2-room apartment in the center of the city. Angelica decided that it was a good investment for the future, because one day she hoped to get married and have children. But almost the first thing she did was go to the nursing home. Selena's grandmother was in clear consciousness. Angelica could not lie to say that her granddaughter was alive, just, you see, went away and forgot her. But even the nightmarish truth could not reveal, wanting to soften at least a little blow. She said that Selena died as a result of an accident. She was not saved in time. And then Angelica offered Grandma Eugenia something. She said that it was Selena's last will. That she said she wanted Angelica to take care of the old lady. Lying was horrible, unbearable, but I had to. Grandma Kathy was happy to move out of the nursing home. After that, she even improved her health, which doctors, by the way, explain by the fact that the state of the nervous system in general is important for the body. Lucy flew out of Jamaica even earlier than Angelica. And although everything was over, everything became finally clear. The friendship was broken definitively. Only about a year after the events had ended did Angelique learn that Lucy had returned to her parents in the village, where she had gotten together with a man and was hardly working. Several times Angelique thought about what was needed: to go to her former friend, support her, to save her somehow. But then she forbade herself. She persuaded herself that Lucy herself chose how to live her life. A few years later, having already received a diploma and working as an accountant in a small firm not far from home, Angelica met a man. Harvey was practically a neighbor, lived in the house across the street. He was 4 years older than her and worked as a construction worker. After 6 months of dating and getting to know his parents, as well as, of course, with Grandma Kathy, whom Angelica now considered her family in no other way, the couple married. If there was a person who asked Angelique if she loved her husband, she would say that she did, of course, and it would not be a lie. True, it was not that love, when the head is round from the rapture dazzling, when the heart stops from excitement. It was a quiet, calm, but deep and some kind of cozy feeling. They just suddenly realized that they were good together. Harvey's family took Angelica well, but she did not dare to tell him about that part of his past, which was like a nightmare. A year later, the family had a daughter, and 3 years later, a son. In time, they bought a dacha. It seemed that life was going its way, and gradually the past began to be forgotten. No, if Angelica wished, she could recreate in her mind, as in reality, every minute of it, but she did not want to. She forbade herself to do it. Only once, when her daughter had already gone to the first grade, Victor suddenly called her. He said that he just wanted to know how things were going. The girl was surprised why this attention after so many years. Victor faltered a bit and then said he was calling to tell her some news about Ethan quitting his job as an agent. I don't want to see him. Angelica almost screamed. For some reason, she felt very scared. And what makes you think it's about you, Mrs.? Victor said, I just thought it might be important to you. In a way, probably. He left his business for his family. He got married a year ago. He had a daughter. I think he's finally happy, but I won't hide it. Sometimes I reminded him of you, and he said that you asked him to forget everything, and he accepted your decision and has no intention to change anything. Angelica closed her eyes. Her heart skipped a beat. It seemed to her that what had bound her to the past, what she had forbidden herself all these years to think about, now finally left her. Thank you for telling me, she replied. They exchanged a few more phrases, and then the conversation ended. Victor promised that they would never bother her again. Mom, who called? Daughter Galaka looked out of the kitchen, where she had been helping her mother to cook, looking through the apples brought from the market, selecting the most brown, dressed up for the pie. No one. Angelica smiled and hugged her daughter. Mom, what are you doing? The little girl frowned. Nothing, sweetie. Everything is fine. Just a speck in my eye. Let's bake a pie. Daddy and Sam will be back from the ice skating rink soon, and we got a cake ready for tea. It was so strange. But for some reason, Angelica suddenly realized that she was happy.